Welcome to Women Disrupting, a podcast amplifying the voice of women who are disrupting the status quo to create a more equitable, united, and peaceful world. I am delighted to have Lisa Adams on today's Women Disrupting podcast episode. Lisa worked as a nurse for a large part of her career and now works as a holistic midlife mentor. She helps women uncover their superpowers by awakening their womb wisdom. She specialises in womb healing, menstruation, and menopause. Part of Lisa's work includes facilitating women's circles, yoga classes, retreats, and one-to-one support sessions for women at different stages of their lives. In this episode, we discuss societal conditioning, patriarchy, witches, menstruation, menopause, stress, energy, trauma, her work in womb healing, and much more. You can find out more about Lisa's work on her website, which I will leave in today's show notes. Welcome, Lisa, to the Women Disrupting podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. How are you?
Thank you, Yasmin. I'm so excited to be here as well, and I'm really good, thank you.
Oh, good. I guess, shall we start by just giving a bit of context as to your journey? Because I know we've just been talking, you started out as a nurse, and now I was looking on your Instagram before, Lisa, and you say that you're a holistic midlife mentor and you do lots of different practices like womb healing. So just talk to me a bit about that journey.
Okay, sure. So yeah, my past was in nursing. I was a registered nurse for 30 years, and I went back to university within that time to do a master's in education. And then I spent some time as a lecturer in health and social care. So my background has always been in health and education. And I was still working in the NHS up until a few years ago. But I just knew that there was more that I needed to do, that my work was needed on a deeper level. And I just woke up one morning, counted how many days I'd been alive, and realized that I didn't want to spend another day doing anything that didn't make my soul sing, and that I wasn't on that soul purpose journey that I knew that I should have been on. So I handed my notice in that day. I had nothing to go to. That was after 30 years, and I was in a senior position. And I gave my notice in that day and just left that space open to the universe for me to step into. And the space was in feeling a deep calling for me to be in service to women. And that is how this journey started, of me going down more of a holistic route, which is like still looking after people, but in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that you describe that journey because in coaching, we use this model that I've realized is perhaps a model that's been created by a man for men. It's devised by Joseph Campbell called The Hero's Journey, and and he uses the terminology call to adventure. But in this book that I've just been talking to you about, she's like, for women, it isn't about that. It's more like a call to life and going back to your roots. Would you say that's what it was when you woke up that morning?
I would say, without knowing so, yes, because it was a real primordial call that I felt. It wasn't something I heard, it was just something that I felt. And I knew that I had to answer this call, and I had to do it now, because at the time I was just coming up to my 52nd birthday. So I knew that the time was now for me to do this.
And you talk like you've got such wisdom and knowledge, but I sense that it's not something. I know you do a lot of reading, but I sense that this is something within you. Like, so my question is like, how, and if obviously you might disagree, and feel free to disagree if you do, but if it is something that you feel like is innate and primordial, like how does a woman tap into that?
Oh, that is such a good question, and that is part of what I help women to do. And that kind of came from that's where my name kind of stemmed from, of a midlife mentor. I did originally, before I left nursing, I'm certified in menopause well-being, so I was helping more women in midlife. But then realised that well, that was where I am in well, really over midlife. If you think the average age expectancy is 82, and I'm 55 now, so kind of over midlife, but a midlife in my journey through womanhood. And I had an early menopause in my early 40s, and I just felt that this is the stage, this is the midlife stage, and then going into the last stage of womanhood, because we start with the maiden, then the mother, and then the final stage of womanhood is the crone phase, which is where I am now. And crone translates as crown, even though if you look it up in the dictionary, it says a crone is an ugly old woman, which is
Mm.
obviously a very outdated description, but crone translates to crown. So that's where we as women, that we then do wear our crown. And it's the crown that we've earned from all the years through our journey, our seasons of womanhood, and gathered all the wisdom along the way through the maiden and through the mother. And we do tap into our own internal wisdom, but it's just that the problem with it is that we've never been shown how to do that.
And that internal wisdom, would you say like the maiden, i.e. the younger women, have access to it too, or it comes through experience and time?
It's always there
Mm.
because I believe that each season of womanhood stays with you, but then you are within one at a time. You go on this journey, but each stays with you because that's you, that has been you. You know, we still have the playfulness of the maiden, and we still have the nurturing of the mother. You know, that doesn't leave us, but it's more when you get to the crone stage that you've gathered your wisdom, you've had your experiences, and it's always been with us because as women, we hold this wisdom within our wombs and our womb space. So it's always been there. But as we go through a journey of transformation into a new season, it's a phase of our lives where we go inward more because we're not as busy. We're not as busy, we're building up our careers and with our family. We have more time to connect with that.
Yeah, that makes sense, definitely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we don't hear enough people talking about women the way you do. And I remember something that you said, maybe in one of your circles or at the networking event once, about the feminine rising. You said that we're in
Mhm.
an era, yeah, everyone, where the feminine is rising, which I think suggests that we've gone wrong in the West for a long time. How do you think we've lost the way and gone wrong at the moment?
Well, we've gone wrong for it's always been. So this goes back to the patriarchal system when that was first started, because it's a system that we're still living in. So,
Mhm.
that's why this is, a challenge. But the patriarchal system started, in the 14th century when the church was first, the religion and the church first came about, and they realized that women were very different, and this inner knowing and this intuition, it's not called woman's intuition for nothing, though. The intuition that they saw that women had, it was a threat to the church, and that's when they decided to burn these women as witches. And they weren't witches, they were just women, and women that were, because women were always the healers, the herbalists, and the midwives of communities. So this goes all the way back to when the patriarchal system first started, and we've been living in that system ever since.
And when you create, because I guess just for context, if anyone's listening, you create these women's circles where women come together and you carry out different rituals, and it's a safe space to talk about these kind of things like feminine energy and perhaps the kind of the less concrete, tangible things that make us women.
Mm.
But how And it feels okay and safe to do that in a space like that because of how you
Mm.
create it. But what we need is more of that, I think, in the corporate world and the business world and in the systems like the NHS and the education system. But these systems have been made by the patriarchy, so there's still resistance to them. So how do we get these ideas out there without being called witches and challenged in that way again?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's with things like the women's circles and women coming together, things like this that you're doing,
Yeah,
and or the conversations. Everything starts with a conversation, so it's having these open conversations and helping to share and to educate. How this has come about, and that the history, which is his story. So we need to change this now into her story, or to translate it into her story. And the women's circles are so powerful because when witches were being burned, or women were being burned as witches, after that women became scared to gather, and there was a very mistrust within the sisterhood, within women, because mothers were made to testify against daughters and vice versa. So there became a very deep mistrust within women. And that mistrust it's still there today. And like you say, with the women's circle, that is a safe space. So it's where we can gather just to be seen and to be witnessed, and we can learn to trust and support each other again. Because when we don't have that trusting as women within ourselves and within our bodies, then we look for external validation.
yeah. And you always say, don't you, when women come together, there's a powerful energy that's created. What's going on there?
Well, when women work together and the menstrual cycle can sync,
Mm,
which it often does, it may not do when you first start working, but you can work with a team of women, and before long you find that your menstrual cycles are syncing. And that's because the energies are so powerful when women do come together, and that they do say that all our wombs are linked by a golden thread of stardust that comes together in mysterious ways, which I love. I love that saying. So our energy rises exponentially when we come together, because we don't realize as women how powerful we are.
yeah, I love it. And in terms of working with like the rhythms of the body, because let's face it, the systems that we work within aren't conducive to the cycles that a woman's body goes through. Let's take an example of a woman who's still menstruating and experiences a cycle every month. And we know, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, post ovulation is the time when you just want to retreat and slow down,
Hmm.
between then and when you get your period. What can a woman do if she's working in a linear 9 to 5 job and there's demands on her from her employer and the family in that period? What I'm trying to ask Lisa is, how can a woman work with the rhythms of her body when the system she's working within is working against those rhythms?
That again is such an amazing question, because it's something that again we've not been taught how to do. So we don't know. And you're right in that we don't live in a world that is made for women to live in, because we are forced to live in a 24-hour cycle, which is a male cycle. And really, women are, the element of women is water, of the feminine. The element of the feminine is water. And, the feminine is the flow. And the feminine is a 28-day cycle, which is the
Mm,
same cycle as the moon. So we're squeezing this 28-day cycle into a 24-hour cycle. And what that means, as you say, is that within our 28-day cycle, we have different seasons. We have an autumn, a winter, a spring, and a summer. And that's when our body and on our cells need different things. We need different self-care. We need to nourish ourselves in different ways. But we have to just ignore and suppress that,
mm.
because we just have to get up and do it again and just keep going and keep going.
Gosh, yeah, I know. It just makes me a bit angry listening to you, reminding me of like what we have to do to our bodies. So What I guess with the work you do helps women to get back in tune? Give me some examples, even if it's, the womb healing or the circles or the mentoring.
So, well, the womb healing covers kind of everything else that I do as well. I'm a yoga teacher and I teach women's yoga, and womb healing is yoga. And, learning how to regulate and to live in your natural cycle is very womb healing. I'm just qualified in shamanic womb massage. That's very womb healing. So we've got a lot of healing to do in our wombs because we still hold those witch wounds from what we've just been speaking of
Mm.
before. And women hold everything in our wombs. This is where all our life experiences are held. So this is even ancestral wounds, it's generational wounds. So there's a lot there to be healed. So that's why there's, every modality that I do. Sure, I have seen so many transformations, and it absolutely just brings me complete joy when I get a phone call or a message kind of these transformations. And one of them, which was a recent one, was a lady who she'd suffered a lot of abuse and trauma in relationships, of sexual trauma. She'd had a lot going on when she was younger and when she was all through her adult to this date in her 40s. And she felt very unheard. She didn't really have any confidence, felt like she couldn't speak up for herself. So after a few sessions of womb healing and the shamanic wound massage, she now is such a confident woman. She said that she's able to speak up for herself. She's open to looking to be in a new relationship, which she said is something that she would have considered before. She's had feelings of like sexual stirrings, which she just absolutely buried because of the past
Mm.
trauma. She's been able to stand up for herself. She said, I actually spoke up for myself. I found my voice. And she's found this internal confidence and this power for herself that had been taken away from her from her experiences in her past.
Wow, that's amazing. So, was that just like a one-off treatment, or was it a series of different practices?
Well, we did some yoga together, and it was really after the womb massage. So that's a real transformative. It's not just a massage, it's more of a transformative ceremony. So that's a 2 hour treatment, if you like. So after each one, there was a little bit more that was released, that was opened, because I work on the shamanic womb medicine wheel and we have 8 womb gates. So sometimes we get blockages and things get stuck at a certain womb gate, and that means that we can't release. And it could be a stored memory, it could be a stored trauma, it could be emotions that we're holding on to, and we can't really release these. So this is all how this therapy works. So each time it was a little bit more, and then knowing how she responded to that, I could do some work on a different womb gate, and that was up to date. That is the end result.
That's amazing. And the way you're talking reminds me a little bit of this idea that emotions are stored in different places in the body, which is what Gabor Mate writes about in his book, when I think it's his book, When the Body Says No. And there's another one, When the Body Keeps the Score. So
Mm.
is this the idea, Lisa, that you're alluding to here, that we store emotions in different parts of our body, in particular for women in the womb?
Yeah, because if you think emotion is an energy,
Yeah.
so if that's not expressed or felt or processed, then where does it go? So
Mm.
it's stored, and it's actually, it's stored even at a cellular level. I know a lot of Deepak Chopra's work, he talks about our cells having a memory, and even our new cells, when they regenerate, they inherit the old memory of the old cells, and it stays within the body until it's processed. And what happens then is because things aren't being processed, because they're not being felt, then they're kind of stored away. And often this can cause, it can cause a block. It can cause a dis-ease
Mm.
within the energetical body, which then can manifest itself as a disease in the physical body. And as women, we store this in our womb space and also physically in our hips. That's
Yeah.
the area of the body that stores like suppressed and unexpressed emotions. So sometimes it's calling things in, sometimes it's letting things go. And really, until we do, the old saying, "If you got to feel it to heal it," is true. It's just that sometimes it's too painful to feel it. So, a lot of people are disconnected and dissociated from that. So everything I do is very trauma informed. And that's why the beauty of this work is that every woman is different.
It's interesting because I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I said, "Oh, we store quite a lot of emotions in our hips sometimes," and they laughed. And I think a lot of people still don't buy into this idea. And my question to you is, do you get that? Do you get any sort of pushback and challenge with the work you do?
I guess some people may come more believing than others, but the amazing thing is I held a womb healing ceremony at one of the local retreat spaces in Bolton. And again, the messages that I got the next day, and she said, "This really does work, doesn't it?" And so women that would come to anything like that I hold, they must have a certain element of belief in this to actually be present there, I guess. And then when they do start feeling the effects of it, then that just, but then it's just it's trusting yourself, isn't it? It's allowing yourself to be present with that and to feel it, to believe it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course. So imagine the feminine is backed in her revered and respected place in Western
Okay.
society. Finally got this power and energy where it needs to be. I guess, how will we know as human beings what will the world look like that's quite different to what it is today?
Well, we talk a lot about the feminine in this sense, but the feminine, we are it's the whole duality, isn't it? That we are masculine and feminine, as so are
Mm.
men. And the feminine rising and the work that I do, it's not anti men because we need the divine masculine as well. And what the divine feminine does is it opens that up within our men as well. So that this creates a community and a society of, at the minute things are quite confusing because I believe that women in our society now to date have been conditioned to be mini men. So if the women are being mini men, then, where is the feminine energy? The feminine energy of the softness and the nurturing, the heartfelt, the heart centered energy. Where is that? Because women now they've been conditioned to be mini men and to do and almost to prove that they can do what men do. And you mentioned before about women in business and in the corporate world. And I do have a lot of women who reach out and approach me from those areas because what happens is that when you're a woman, especially in such a busy environment as a corporate environment, that you are very busy and a businesswoman, but what you're busy in this headspace because you're doing a lot of thinking and you're doing a lot of doing. So the thinking and the doing energy and the energy of the headspace is a masculine energy. So while women are doing that, that means that they're not really often sitting within the heart centered energy, and that's the being. That's just in the being, not the doing, because women are busy, busy, busy. So if you don't sit in the being of your heart centered energy, then it's almost as if you're abandoning that feminine essence. And remember that the head is the furthest away from our root chakra. And if we're not rooted within our own body, then we will never be able to be our best self and connect with our feminine power. We talk about power, but this is our magic. Our womb space is our power portal. It's our medicine bowl. It's our cauldron. So if we're so in the doing and the busy and the headspace, then we can't, we're almost abandoning that feminine essence of ourselves. It's like abandoning ourselves.
Yeah. I'm glad you made that point because it's not about one or the other, is it? It's not about
No,
feminine is energy is better than the masculine energy. Actually, what you're trying to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the men have suffered as well because
of
there's been a lack
course.
of the feminine in our world.
And if you're a busy woman and you're in the doing and that means that your body will have more masculine energy. So
Mm,
even in relationships, if you've got two masculine energies, that normally results in some kind of conflict.
yes.
The masculine needs the feminine as much as the feminine needs the masculine. And often I've had a lot of women that have shared with me that they were in the busy corporate world and they really struggled. They had a lot of infertility challenges, even to the point of not not being successful, and that they had to go down the road of adoption. And when we spoke of this, they said, "I never realised until right at this moment, until what you've just said, that that's exactly what happened to me."
Mm,
Because when we're stressed as women, our reproductive system is the only optional system in our body. So when we're stressed, our body will close that down or park it up, because the last thing it knows our body needs is for us to start trying to create another life when it's trying to actually just help us survive in our own body and the life that we're living.
yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? And there's so many infertility challenges with women today. It makes sense that it's because we're trying to be men. Yeah. I
And
wonder.
that's on the rise. Infertility
Mm,
is on the rise. And then what happens is, because the body's in this state of stress, then the reproductive system will kind of shut off, but then nothing can come in and nothing can come out. So the toxins from the body can't come out. So then what happens is that these manifest themselves in things like endometriosis, fibroids, like pelvic inflammatory disease, polycystic ovaries, like all these physical painful periods, irregular, heavy periods, and these are the body kind of holding on to things that it's not able to release, and they build up inside our reproductive system.
yes. And then you get women, which I hear often through friends, going to a doctor and either not being heard, oh, it's just heavy period pains, take some paracetamol, or and given exactly that, just something to tape over this, plaster over the symptom. But I think the work that you're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, is trying to get more to the cause rather than the symptom. Is that right?
And yeah, everything has to start at the root cause. And I realised this many years ago when I was in the role of a menopause wellbeing nurse. And a lot of women were coming with all these different symptoms. And I soon realized that, instead of just patching up, putting a band-aid over the
Mm.
symptoms, because often as well, because women are so busy, like we've just said, people do want a quick fix, but we have to just strip it back, strip it back, strip it back, and go right back to the nervous system, which works in tandem with our endocrine system, which is our hormone system. And let's look at what's going on. And it's so interesting, because when women now within the womb healing work come to me, and I have an understanding of where they're at and what's going on in their life, then it makes complete sense as to what they've come to present with. So
Mm.
it's looking at, because if your nervous system is dysregulated, then nothing else in your body will be regulated. So our hormone systems won't be. So, women that are experiencing menopause, the first thing is to, again, go back to what is going on in my life. How am I living? And most people are living in chronic stress, but it's become so the norm that they don't realize. But then the body is, like you say, it's keeping the score of that.
Yeah. Gosh, I could listen to this all day. You're actually making me, after this call, want to just go sit in my yoga room and do nothing. It makes so much sense what you're saying. I could listen to
And
you.
then
Go on.
when you do sit and do nothing,
Mm,
I always say that your body is your home. and you
Mm.
must always return to her, because our body is this physical vehicle through this lifetime as a human, through this human experience. And often we don't speak to her. If you were to ask your body, how can I look after you more? What do you think that she would say? We never really thank our body just for, carrying us around, just for helping us to breathe, or, we just don't really acknowledge that. But if you were to actually, and like you say, yoga room, that is the absolute beauty of yoga, is that gives you the space and that time with yourself to do that and to go within and to
Mm,
ask those questions. And
definitely.
again, some people don't want to do that because when they go, they don't want to connect with what's within because it is too painful.
Yes. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Sit and do nothing. But for some
Mm.
people, that's one of the hardest, most painful things to do.
And I've had that a lot with women who come to my women's circle. They say, "This, I'm not used to this, and because I'm normally so busy." And they do struggle with the silence or with the sharing. And they said, "This is all new to me," but then they keep coming back.
Yeah.
So it's something that they may feel that they need. And it's been funny really, because it's the women that have said this, that when we've been doing breath work, they're the women that they don't really do the breath work. They say, "I did it a bit, but I didn't really follow it. I didn't let myself do it." And I've said, sometimes it's a case of just trusting yourself to do it. And then when we share further, it's that they don't trust themselves. And they probably don't trust themselves because they're not rooted in their own body because they're so busy. So it's kind of a vicious circle, really, when you look at it like that.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I love your circles. And for anyone who hasn't been to a women's circles, I know no women's circle is the same, but just give us a bit of an idea as to like what happens in a women's circle, in yours in particular.
Okay, sure. That'll be really nice to share, because when you said a ritual before, I can imagine people thinking, "Oh, she is a witch after all." So a women's circle, it is, and this is what, like we say, women used to do when our ancestors would have gathered in circle. And when we spoke before about the seasons of a woman's life, we would have the younger women in communities with the wise women, and the stories would be shared and the wisdoms would be passed down. And that's got lost in our culture and our society. So I do have women, in their early 20s, and then some of the women they go up to being in the 70s, which is amazing that is being recreated within this space. And it's a safe space. So what is said in the circle stays in the circle. And we have an opening, the space is all cleansed, and it's a sacred space. We have an altar where there's candles and flowers, and what we bring in the elements. So there's candles for the fire, there's flowers for the earth. I have feathers and incense for the air and the water. So it's a sacred space that's set up, and there's always a different theme, so it's always very different. And I'll share, last month was on forgiveness, and it was self forgiveness, because we always have to start with us rather than other people or our external environment. And this theme came around from conversations from the last circle. I usually try and follow it on from something that
Mm,
may have came up from the last one, and things that maybe people were struggling with or that were mentioned. So the concept of self forgiveness came up, and the ritual that we did within. We usually do a meditation, but this time I did a breath work for forgiveness, and I did this with some shamanic drumming. And after this, we did a letter to dear past me, and this was with the intention of forgiving ourselves for, it may have been something that we said to ourselves. It may be the way we speak to ourselves. It could be a mindset. It could be a habit, or it could be behavior. It could be the way we respond. It could be something that we're holding on to, how we react to something. So whatever resonated, it was a letter to say, like, I will let that go. I forgive you for that. And some women told themselves in the letter that they said, "I love you." And she said that that's the first time that I've ever said that to myself. And there was tears. Every single woman cried. Sometimes you cry for other women because you just feel that. a connection in your heart. And it was a very releasing, circle. It was very powerful. And then usually at the end, just to kind of shift the energy a little bit into the leaves in a high energy, we had some movement and dance. So that is how it usually incorporates those elements, but in different ways because each theme is different.
And yeah, like you say, the powerful spaces are often done around about the cycles of the moon, full moon and new moon. Is that right?
I did do that. They sometimes they fall in those
Yeah.
around those times, which one of them did last week. Sometimes they do fall, so then we will incorporate the elements of where the moon is at. But you know, some of the women say that when they come each month, it helps them to reset and to carry on, get through the month. It's been described as cheap therapy, which I said I'll take that.
Absolutely. I love it. Definitely. What's the most important thing women need to hear right now, just to finish?
I think the most important thing that women need to hear right now is that you are enough, because we're torn in so many different directions of being everything to everyone, but still not feeling that we're good enough or that we're enough or that we're lacking, and that they're more than enough, and that they actually hold all their own magic, but no one's shown them how to actually access that.
Yeah, that's such a good one to end. We are enough, and we don't tell ourselves that enough, do we?
No.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Your energy is amazing and inspiring, Lisa. So I will share in the show notes links to your Instagram. Have you got a website? Where can people find you?
I have got a website. I'm just updating it with more of the womb healing at the minute, but it's still there to have a look at, what I offer.
So I'll put your website address in the
Thank
show
you.
notes as well. Thank you so much, Lisa.
And
You
thank you for having me. I could talk about this all day. So all week, forever.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I'm always looking for disruptive women as guests. If you think you'd make a great guest or know anyone who would, then please email me with the details. You can email info@yasminarifcoaching.com. More details in today's show notes. Remember to show up and share your truth, because the world is hungry for women who show up and tell the truth, unafraid and free, expanding to the very edges of who they were always meant to be.